Hi, I'm Carl with Graphic Transfer, and today we're going to address getting a piece of wood ready to carve or engrave on. We've had a lot of questions over the years, people asking me exactly what I do to get a piece of wood ready, and there's lots of ways to go about this, but I'm going to show you what I do to get one ready. Now I'm going to be using an orbital sander. And if you were ever going to go out and buy a sander, this is by far what you want, an orbital sander, not a little palm sander. Get an orbital sander. They work great. They don't leave any marks in the wood when you're done, and that's important if you want a nice finish. So I've cut a piece of wood here, and it's got real squared off edges, and I'm going to show you that even with a sander you can take those down. Now if you're just working by hand, that's fine. If I was going to do this by hand, I'd probably start out with 150 grit sandpaper in a sanding block, which you can buy for less than $5. Cut your paper to fit the block, put it in there, and you're going to sand with the grain. It's going to take you a while to do it by hand, which is why if you can, you want to use a sander. Then I would probably finish with 220 grit if I were hand sanding. And you can still get the edges down pretty good, even hand sanding. It's just going to take a little while. Okay, I'm going to show you how I do it with the orbital sander. Now it's a good idea, normally I'd put a mask on right now because this does have a little dust collector on it, but it isn't that great. You're still going to have dust floating all around, so good idea to wear some protection. Okay, so as you can probably see, this is pretty rough, and it's about let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of wood that are glued together. It would be similar to something you would find if you were buying a piece of wood at like Michael's or something like that. This is alder, so it's pretty nice wood. So let's get going here, see what happens. Using an 80 grit sandpaper right now. Now I know that was kind of hard to hear me because this thing is really loud. I'm using an 80 grit sandpaper to start with on here, and you can see that took this thing down really nice and smooth on the top here. And you notice that I also did the back side, and I always would do the back side. When somebody grabs something that you've done and they pick it up, most of their sensory through their fingers is on the back side. If that's rough and splintery, they're probably not going to be real happy with it. So I always sand the back side also. Okay, now I told you I would show you about getting these edges, and we're going to do that right now. Okay, now I'll have Shirley zoom in on that a little bit. And you aren't going to be able to see exactly. There's no way you could, but you're going to be able to see pretty well. This is pretty smooth. I've got some pretty nice round edges on there now, almost as good as if I'd have ran them through the router a little bit first. So we've got some pretty nice edges. It's a little bit rough to the feel right at the moment because I was using an 80 grit paper, and I usually start out that way. And now we'll switch to the one that I blew off the bench there, which is a 180. So let's switch paper here. Okay. Now this is going to take it down extremely smooth with a 180. All right, here we go. Okay, now I've got the back nice and smooth, so if somebody feels that, it's going to feel nice to the touch. And this top surface is nice. Now I need to go over my faces here and my edges again with the fine paper to make that look a little bit nicer and feel better. Okay, we're just about done to what I would call being done. I've got some 220 sandpaper here, and I might finish off just a little bit with that. Sometimes the sander will leave a little bit of a ridge when you're trying to round things off. So I'll go over it just a little bit with some 220. Now I want you to notice something. When I did this edge, I went like this because that's with the grain. Over here, I had to go like this because that's with the grain. You always got to stay with the grain when you're hand sanding. If you don't, you're going to leave marks on there, and they're going to show forever, especially when you put lacquer on it. And we'll get this one, and we'll have it. Now, this little edge right here, all four of those are pretty sharp. So just very gently hit those edges. Not hard, just very gently. Go over those edges like that. Takes that sharpness away. Okay. Now we're pretty much ready to go to get some lacquer on there. So we'll shut off for just a minute and get set up to spray some lacquer. All right, we're back. Before we spray some finish on this wood, I